The crystalline chambers of the Galactic Council hummed with tension as representatives from 47 species gathered in emergency session. The massive dome stretched above them, its transparent walls showing the swirling nebula beyond.
Admiral?
Daeho Kim stood at the human podium, his weathered face betraying no emotion, as he watched the alien delegates whisper among themselves in dozens of different languages. The air itself seemed to vibrate with unspoken hostility. For weeks, the council had been debating the same tired arguments. The humans were too controlling, too involved, too protective of species that didn't want protection. Admiral Kim had heard it all before, but today felt different. Today something had shifted in the cosmic balance. The Terran Federation hereby withdraws from all galactic affairs, he announced, his voice cutting through the chaos like a plasma blade. The chamber fell silent instantly. Even the translator seemed to pause in shock, effective immediately. Humanity will no longer participate in council decisions, peacekeeping operations, or diplomatic interventions. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then the chamber erupted. The hegemony's six-armed Chancellor Vexstar leaned forward, his crimson eyes gleaming with a mixture of disbelief and opportunistic hunger. His species had been pushing for this moment for decades, but now that it was here, even he seemed stunned. Admiral Kim, surely you cannot mean, I mean exactly what I said. Daeha's aide, Commander Hyojin Park, stepped forward with a datapad, her movements crisp and military precise. The device in her hands displayed 3 centuries of human intervention records, billions of lives saved, thousands of wars prevented, entire species pulled back from the brink of extinction. 300 years of keeping your species from destroying each other, 300 years of sacrifice. And what gratitude do we receive? Accusations of imperialism, demands for our withdrawal. Zentari delegate, a crystalline being whose body reflected the chamber's light in prismatic patterns, spoke in a voice like tinkling bells. Speak of sacrifice, but your fleets patrol our borders. Your soldiers stand on our worlds. Your laws govern our trade. Our laws prevent you from enslaving the Kepler colonies, Commander Park replied sharply. Our soldiers protect your merchant ships from raiders. Our fleets keep the Void Hunters from turning your worlds into ash. At the mention of the Void Hunters, several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The towering creature of living shadow that represented that species rasped through its translator, the sound like metal scraping against bone. You controlled us, dictated our expansion, limited our rightful conquests. Admiral Kim's eyes hardened. The Void Hunters had been responsible for the genocide of 17 species before humanity had contained them. They fed on suffering, literally, consuming the psychic energy of dying civilizations. Rightful conquests, he repeated. You mean the systematic extermination of peaceful worlds? The strong consume the weak, the shadow creature hissed. It is the natural order. Then conquer away, Daeho replied coldly. He turned to his communications officer, Captain Seungmin Lee. Initiate Protocol 7. The captain's fingers flew across his control panel. Across the chamber, every human delegate's communication device chimed simultaneously. The sound was soft, almost musical, but it carried the weight of finality. The Aquari representative, her gill slits fluttering with agitation, raised a webbed hand. Perhaps we can reach a compromise. Reduced human presence, but not complete withdrawal. Compromise. Admiral Kim laughed, but there was no humor in it. We've been compromising. For 3 centuries, when the hegemony wanted to expand into the Vega system, we negotiated buffer zones instead of stopping them entirely. When the Void Hunters demanded hunting rights on frontier worlds, we gave them unpopulated systems instead of destroying their fleets. When the Zentari blocked trade routes, we found alternate paths instead of forcing passage. He gestured to the assembled delegates. Every decision we've made has been softened by your complaints. Every military action has been restrained by your politics. Every peace treaty has been weakened by your demands for sovereignty. The hegemony's Chancellor Vexstar's mandibles clicked nervously, but the stability you provided was taken for granted, Commander Park interrupted. Your intelligence reports show hegemony fleets massing at the Centauri border. Void Hunter raiding parties testing our patrol routes. Centauri militants calling for revolution. You've all been preparing for this moment. The chamber erupted in denials and accusations. Species that had been allies for centuries suddenly turned on each other. The careful, diplomatic balance that had maintained galactic peace began to crumble in real time. Admiral Kim watched the chaos with grim satisfaction. This is what you wanted. Freedom from human interference. Independence from human protection. The right to settle your own disputes. Across the chamber, every human delegate rose in unison. The movement was perfectly synchronized, like a military formation. They had trained for this moment, prepared for the day when the galaxy would finally reject their protection. Without another word, they filed out, leaving their seats empty for the first time in 3 centuries. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden silence, each step marking the end of an era, as the chamber doors sealed behind them with a soft hiss. Chancellor Vextar's mandibles clicked in what his species considered laughter, but there was uncertainty in the sound now. Finally, he hissed, trying to convince himself as much as the others. The galaxy is free. The words hung in the air, like a death sentence none of them had realized they were pronouncing. 6 months later, the silence from human space had become deafening. Captain Yoon-Soo Cho stood on the bridge of her patrol ship, the Defiant Dawn, watching the endless void where once busy trade routes had carried ships from 1,000 worlds. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency, but outside the viewports, space itself seemed to hold its breath. Her ship hung at the edge of what had once been called the Terran Federation, now simply known as the Barrier Zone, the invisible line that separated human space from the rest of the galaxy had become as real as any physical wall. Nothing got through, nothing got out. The humans had simply vanished. Ma'am, her communications officer, Lieutenant Boris Song, looked up from her console, her face illuminated by the soft blue glow of incoming transmissions. The hegemony fleet is requesting permission to transit through the Kepler corridor. Yoon-Soo didn't even glance at the tactical display showing the massive alien fleet waiting just outside the boundary. 12 heavy cruisers and their escort ships, enough firepower to level a small moon. 6 months ago, they would have been granted passage with a simple diplomatic request. Now, they were just another group of outsiders pressing against the walls of human space. Denied, she replied without hesitation. All alien traffic is prohibited. Lieutenant Song's fingers hovered over her controls. But ma'am, that's the fastest route to the Vega system. Their colonies are under attack by Void Hunter raiders. Those ships are carrying medical supplies and defensive weapons. I said denied. The young officer's face showed her confusion. Before the withdrawal, humanity had been the first to respond to such crises. Human medical ships would have already been en route. Human patrol fleets would have been hunting the raiders. Now, they watched from behind their invisible walls as the galaxy burned. Send them the standard message, Yoon-Soo ordered. All alien vessels must use alternate routes. No exceptions. On the other side of the galaxy, the consequences of human withdrawal were becoming brutally clear. The Void Hunters, those creatures of living shadow that fed on death and suffering, had been unleashed like a plague across the outer systems. Without human patrol ships to intercept them, they moved freely through space, their dark vessels appearing. Without warning above peaceful worlds, the latest reports made for grim reading. 17 worlds had been glassed in the past month, their surfaces turned to molten rock by the Hunters' reality-warping weapons. The Kepler Mining Consortium had been wiped out entirely, their asteroid habitats cracked open like eggs. The peaceful Aquaria had lost 3 of their ocean worlds. Billions of their people boiled alive in superheated seas. Meanwhile, the hegemony had wasted no time in expanding their territory. Their 6-armed Chancellor Vextar had announced the liberation of the Centauri Republic's outer colonies, claiming they were too weak to defend themselves. His fleets had swept through the border systems like a crimson tide, overwhelming defenses that had relied on human backup for generations. Species that had lived in harmony for centuries were now at each other's throats. The Zentaur had accused the Aquarii of harboring Void Hunter sympathizers. The Kepler survivors blamed everyone for their losses. Old grudges that had been buried under human diplomacy erupted into open warfare. Admiral Ji Woo Nam watched the reports stream across her screens from Earth's Defense Command. Deep beneath the planet's surface, the massive underground facility had been expanded dramatically since the withdrawal, its corridors now stretching 4 kilometers through solid rock. Thousands of personnel monitored every alien transmission, every ship movement, every battle. Phase 1 is complete, she reported to the shadowy figure on her screen. The secure connection showed only a silhouette, but the voice was unmistakably human. All human colonies have been evacuated to the core worlds. The fortress wall is operational. The evacuation had been a marvel of logistics. Over 50 billion humans had been relocated from frontier worlds to the heavily defended core systems around Earth, Mars, and the inner colonies. Not a single human civilian remained outside the barrier zone. Every research station, every mining facility, every remote outpost had been abandoned or destroyed to prevent alien access to human technology. Good, came the reply. Let them remember what they've lost. In the depths of human space, massive construction projects worked around the clock. The shipyards around Jupiter had been expanded beyond recognition, their skeletal frameworks now stretching across millions of cubic kilometers. Ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen took shape in these secret facilities, their hulls incorporating technologies that had been theoretical just months before. The vessels defied conventional design. Where alien ships were built for speed or firepower, these new human craft seemed to bend space around themselves. Their hulls shimmered with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. Their weapons were not visible from the outside, but test. Firings on dead worlds had shown their terrible power. Dr. Manesio Park, head of the Advanced Weapons Division, stood before one such test site. The planet had once been a gas giant, but now only debris remained where the weapon had touched it. The matter hadn't been destroyed or vaporized. It had simply ceased to exist, leaving a perfectly spherical void in space. The reality distortion field is stable, she reported to her team. We can literally delete matter from existence. Her assistant, Dr. Jahan Kim, checked his readings with obvious unease. The aliens have no defense against this. Their shields, their armor, their entire understanding of physics becomes meaningless. That's the point, Manesio replied coldly. They wanted us gone. They'll get their wish. But first they'll learn what protection really means. The construction continued day and night. Automated factories built weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics. Shipyards assembled fleets that could appear anywhere in the galaxy instantly. Research stations developed technologies that made human soldiers into something approaching gods. And through it all, the silence continued. No human spoke to the outside galaxy. No human ship left the barrier zone. No human responded to increasingly desperate pleas for help. The galaxy had demanded freedom from human interference. Now they were learning what that freedom really cost. The war had been raging for 8 months when the Galactic Council finally understood their mistake. Chancellor Vextar's flagship, the Crimson Dominion, drifted powerless through the asteroid field where his fleet had been ambushed. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the bridge as smoke poured from damaged consoles. The Void Hunters had struck without warning, their shadow ships materializing from the darkness like nightmares given form. What should have been a routine patrol through the hegemony's own territory had become a massacre. 12 heavy cruisers reduced to scrap metal in less than 20 minutes. Vextar slumped in his command chair, his 6 arms hanging limply at his sides, his breathing. Apparatus cracked during the attack, wheezed with each labored breath. Green blood seeped from wounds across his carapace, where flying debris had struck him. Round him, his bridge crew worked frantically to restore power to their dying ship. "Sir," his navigation officer called out, "we're detecting more shadow." "Signatures. They're coming back to finish us." The Chancellor's crimson eyes dimmed. This was how it ended. The mighty hegemony, conquerors of 17 systems, reduced to prey for creatures that fed on death itself. He thought of the human patrol. Ships that used to sweep through these sectors, their mere presence enough to keep the Void Hunters at bay. Those ships would have detected the ambush hours before it happened. Their advanced sensors could track shadow ships through dimensions that other species couldn't even perceive. "Send another message to the humans," he wheezed, his voice barely audible above the sparking consoles. "Tell them we'll restore their council seats, full diplomatic immunity, whatever they want." His aide, a younger hegemony officer whose 3 sets of arms trembled with shock, shook his head. "Sir, we've sent 47 messages. They don't respond.
No.
The communication array at the barrier zone just ignores us. 50 messages, 100. Keep trying until the ship's hull groaned as something massive struck it from outside. Through the cracked viewport, Vexstar could see the approaching shadow ships, their forms shifting and writhing like living darkness against the stars. They moved without engines, without visible propulsion, bending space itself to their will. "Hands abandoned ship," he ordered quietly. "Maybe some of the escape pods will make it." As his crew scrambled for the evacuation stations, Vexstar remained in his chair. He had demanded this freedom. He had celebrated when the humans left. Now he would die for it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Scout Captain Yunaha piloted her stealth ship through the ruins of what had been the Proxima trade hub. The massive space station had once housed 3 million beings from dozens of species. Merchants, families, researchers, artists, all living together in the kind of harmony that had defined the golden age of galactic civilization. Now it was a tomb. Bodies floated in the vacuum where corridors had once buzzed with life. The Void Hunters had been thorough, draining every last spark of psychic energy from their victims before moving on. The dead drifted in perfect silence, faces frozen in expressions of terror and despair. Yunez's ship, the Whisper, was a marvel of human engineering. Its hull was composed of metamaterials that bent light around it, making it invisible to conventional sensors. Its engines produced no heat signature, no gravitational disturbance. She could drift through a battle, fleet without being detected. But invisibility couldn't protect her from what she was seeing. "Command, this is Ghost 7, she reported, her voice steady despite the horror surrounding her. "Proxima hub is completely destroyed, no survivors." The response came instantly through her encrypted channel. "Acknowledged. Ghost 7. Return to base." As Yuna turned her ship toward human space, she passed through the debris field that had once been the hub's defensive fleet. Zentari crystal ships lay shattered like broken glass. Query biovessels had been drained of their organic components, leaving only empty shells. The hegemony's proud warships had been cracked open like nuts, their crews consumed. She remembered patrolling these same routes just 10 months ago, when the Whisper had been part of the Terran Federation's early warning network. Her squadron had kept the trade routes safe, responding to distress calls within minutes. The Void Hunters had been contained to the outer darkness, too afraid to venture into human-protected space. Now they roamed freely, spreading terror wherever they went. Her sensors detected movement in the debris field. A single escape pod, its occupants' life signs weak, but stable. Yuna's finger hovered over the controls. Standard procedure was to avoid contact with alien survivors. The humans had withdrawn completely, and any rescue attempt would reveal their continued presence in the area. But this was a child, young Zentari, no more than 50 years old by their species standards. Its crystalline form flickered weakly. In the pod's emergency lighting, "Ghost 7 to command," she transmitted. "I have a survivor. Requesting permission to negative Ghost 7. You are not to make contact with alien vessels. Return to base immediately." Yuna stared at the pod for a long moment. The child inside was dying, its crystal matrix fracturing from shock and exposure. A simple medical transport to the nearest functioning station would save its life. The nearest station was in human space, and no alien was allowed to cross the barrier zone. "Acknowledged command," she said finally. "Ghost 7 returning to base." As she engaged her engines, the escape pod's emergency beacon grew fainter and fainter. She didn't look back. The journey to the barrier zone took 3 hours. During the flight, Her communications array picked up dozens of distress calls from across the galaxy. Colonies under attack. Trade ships being hunted. Entire star systems going dark as the Void Hunters swept through them like a plague. Each call was a reminder of what the galaxy had lost. Human response fleets would have been scrambling to answer every distress signal. Human diplomatic corps would have been working to prevent conflicts before they started. Human medical ships would have been racing to provide aid to the wounded. Instead, it was only silence from human space. When Yuna finally crossed the barrier zone, she felt no satisfaction. They had warned the galaxy. They had offered protection. They had been told to leave. Now the galaxy was reaping what it had sown behind her. The escape pod's beacon finally went silent. The last free systems were falling when the Galactic Council made their final, desperate attempt to reach humanity. What remained of galactic civilization limped through space in a massive fleet of surviving ships, carrying the remnants of 37 species toward the invisible barriers that surrounded human space. The fleet stretched for thousands of kilometers, a ragtag collection of vessels that told the story of the galaxy's collapse. Ancient Zentari crystal ships, their once brilliant surfaces now cracked and dim, bio-vessels that pulsed weakly with failing life support systems. Hegemony warships, stripped of their weapons, converted into refugee transports. Even the proud merchant fleets of the core worlds had been reduced to cargo haulers packed with desperate survivors. Chancellor Vextar's flagship, the Crimson Dominion, led the procession. The massive ship had been patched together with salvaged parts from a dozen different species. Its hull bore the scars of countless battles, and its engines barely functioned. But it was still flying, still carrying the hopes of billions. Please. Chancellor Vextar's message played on repeat as his dying species' last ship drifted toward the invisible wall. His voice, once commanding and proud, now cracked with desperation. We were wrong. We need you. The galaxy needs you. The message had been broadcasting for 6 hours straight. Behind the flagship, thousands of other ships added their own pleas. Children's voices in dozens of languages. Scientists begging for their research to be preserved. Military commanders offering their complete surrender. All directed toward the empty void where human space began. Captain Minho Yoon monitored the fleet from his command station aboard the hidden observation post. Sanctuary 7. The station existed in a fold of space-time. Invisible to conventional sensors, but with a perfect view of the barrier zone. Its massive sensor arrays tracked every ship, every life sign, every desperate transmission from the approaching fleet. Orders, sir? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Admiral Sujin Bey studied the tactical display with cold precision. The holographic projection showed the alien fleet in devastating detail. Ships packed with refugees, children, the last survivors of civilizations that had stood for millennia. Her enhanced neural interface fed her a constant stream of data about each vessel's condition, its passenger manifest, its remaining life support. The numbers were staggering. 12 million Zentari refugees aboard crystal ships that were slowly fracturing in the vacuum. 8 million Aquari packed into biovessels that needed constant moisture to survive. Hundreds of thousands of hegemony citizens, their six-armed forms cramped into spaces designed for humanoid species. The proud warrior race reduced to begging for sanctuary. Maintain the barrier, she ordered. Let them through only if they surrender, unconditionally. Captain Yoon's face showed his internal struggle. Sir, they're dying out there. The Aquari ships are already showing signs of biological failure. The Zentari vessels won't last another day. They made their choice. But even as she spoke, Admiral Bey felt the weight of command pressing down on her. She could see the children on those ships. Young Zentari, whose crystal forms flickered with fear. Aquari tadpoles who would never see their homeworld's oceans again. Hegemony younglings who didn't understand why their parents wept. Her tactical officer, Commander Dayun Park, highlighted sections of the fleet on the display. Sir, we're detecting Void Hunter signatures on the edge of the system. They're tracking the refugee fleet. The shadows were coming. It's the creatures of living darkness that had consumed world after world, leaving nothing but empty husks in their wake. They followed the scent of fear and desperation like sharks following blood in the water. How long until they reached the fleet? Admiral Bay asked. 18 hours, maybe less. The alien fleet waited for 3 days at the edge of human space. During that time, the galaxy's final tragedy played out in slow motion. Some ships ran out of life support, their occupants suffocating in the cold vacuum. Others suffered catastrophic system failures, their hulls cracking open to spill their precious cargo of refugees into space. The Void Hunters arrived on schedule, their shadow ships materializing from the darkness like nightmares given form. They didn't attack immediately. Instead, they circled the refugee fleet like predators. Feeding on the terror and despair that radiated from millions of frightened minds. Chancellor Vexstar watched from his bridge as the shadow ships closed in. His crimson eyes, once filled with pride and ambition, now held only the hollow acceptance of defeat. His 6 arms hung limply at his sides as he prepared to record his final message. "This is Chancellor Vexstar of the Hegemony," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "We who demanded freedom from human protection now face extinction. We who called them oppressors now beg for their mercy. Let our fate serve as a warning to any who might repeat our mistakes." The shadow ships began their final approach, reality. Bending around them as they prepared to feed, screams of the dying carried across the radio frequencies as the Void Hunters began their harvest. Finally, Chancellor Vexstar's broken voice came through the communications array one last time. "We surrender. Unconditionally, please. Save what's left of us." The words hung in the vacuum like a prayer. Behind him, the last ships of his people began to break apart under the shadow creature's assault. The proud hegemony, conquerors of 17 systems, reduced to cosmic dust. In a matter of minutes, Admiral Bay watched it all from her command station. Her face remained impassive, but her hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at her to order the barriers down, to send the fleet out to rescue the survivors. But her orders were clear. The barriers remained closed. The alien fleets. Desperate transmissions continued for another hour, growing weaker and more fragmented as the Void Hunters completed their work. Then, gradually, the voices fell silent. The proud civilizations that had once spanned the galaxy were reduced to echoes in the darkness. Only then did Admiral Bay allow herself to feel the weight of what they had witnessed. The galaxy had chosen its path. Now, it would face the consequences in the depths of human space. The final preparations were already underway. When the barriers finally dropped, the galaxy held its breath. The moment came without warning, without fanfare. 1 second. The invisible walls that had surrounded human space for nearly 2 years were impenetrable. The next, they simply ceased to exist. The ships that emerged from human space were unlike anything that had existed before. Where the old Terran Federation vessels had been sleek and functional, these new craft defied comprehension. They moved without engines, their hulls shimmering with an inner light that seemed to bend the very fabric of space around them. They didn't fly through the void so much as folded, appearing and disappearing across vast distances in the blink of an eye. The lead vessel, a massive dreadnought called the Eternal Dawn, imperialized above the ruins of what had been the Proxima trade hub. Its presence alone caused nearby debris to reorganize itself, dead metal suddenly glowing with renewed purpose. The ship's hull bore no visible weapons, no gun ports or missile bays. Didn't need them. Across the galaxy, similar vessels appeared simultaneously at every system where conflict raged. Not hundreds of ships, but thousands. Each one positioned with surgical precision surrounding Void Hunter fleets, separating warring factions, establishing dominance through sheer presence rather than firepower. Colonel In Ho Kong stepped from his transport onto the ruined surface of New Babylon, the Void Hunters' primary fortress world. The planet had been their stronghold for millennia, a place where they had tortured and consumed countless billions. Its surface was covered in crystalline spires that pulsed with stolen psychic energy, feeding the shadow creatures that called this nightmare realm home. But now, as Inho's boots touched the obsidian ground, the entire planet seemed to recoil. His powered armor made him appear as a figure of living starlight, reality bending around him as he walked. The suit wasn't just protective gear, it was a manifestation of humanity's new mastery over the fundamental forces of existence, the void. Hunters emerged from their spires like smoke given form, their shadow bodies writhing with rage and hunger. These creatures had devoured entire star systems, had made the galaxy's bravest warriors flee in terror. They had never known fear themselves until now. "Surrender," Inho commanded, his voice carrying across continents through technology that treated physics as a suggestion. Words reached every corner of the planet simultaneously, bypassing the need for sound waves or radio transmission. Reality itself became his messenger. The effect was immediate and absolute. The Void Hunters, creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for eons, fell to their knees. Their shadow forms flickered and wavered, suddenly unable to maintain coherence in the presence of Inho's transformed humanity. The psychic energy they had stolen over millennia began to dissipate, returning to the universe from which it had been torn. "You fed on fear," Inho continued, walking toward the largest spire. "You consumed hope. You turned life into suffering for your own pleasure." With each step, the crystalline structures around him began to crack. "Ow." "But you never understood what you were really fighting. You thought we were just another species. To be harvested," he reached out with one armored hand and touched the spire. The entire structure, kilometers tall, and filled with the compressed agony of 1 billion souls, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not shattered, deleted from reality itself. You were wrong. Across the galaxy, the same scene played out with mechanical precision. Human forces appeared wherever the Void Hunters had established footholds. The shadow creatures, for all their cosmic power, found themselves helpless against humanity's new abilities. They were beings of darkness and chaos. But the humans had learned to command order itself in the hegemony's former territory. Admiral Sujinbei stood on the bridge of her flagship as it materialized above the capital world of Vex Prime. The planet below was in ruins, its 6-armed population scattered to refugee camps across the system. Those who survived the wars looked up at her ship with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. "Begin reconstruction," she ordered. The words were transmitted not just to her crew, but to the planet itself. Nanomachines that existed in dimensions beyond normal space-time began to reorganize matter at the molecular level. Destroyed cities rebuilt themselves. Poisoned atmospheres cleared. The dead rose from their graves, their life patterns restored. From quantum echoes, the hegemony survivors watched in awe as their world was reborn around them. But they also noticed the new structures that appeared alongside the restoration. Monitoring stations, enforcement facilities. Reminders that this gift came with a price. Meanwhile, in the former Zentari territories, similar scenes of impossible reconstruction played out. Crystal cities that had been shattered by war reformed themselves. Aquariocean worlds that had been boiled dry filled with pristine water. Every world that had been touched by the galactic conflict was healed, but also claimed. The wars that had raged for years ended in 72 hours, not through negotiation or surrender, but through the simple reality that resistance had become impossible. Humanity had evolved beyond the need for conventional warfare. They didn't conquer through force, they conquered through inevitability. Admiral Daeho Kim, now bearing the rank of Fleet Admiral, stood in the rebuilt council chambers on what had once been the neutral station of Harmony Point. The massive structure had been completely reconstructed, its crystalline walls now bearing distinctly human architectural elements. Behind him stood the new human command structure, Admiral Sujin Bei, General Young-Soo Park, and dozens of others who had been preparing for this moment during the long silence. The surviving alien delegates sat in their assigned seats, their faces showing the hollow acceptance of the defeated. There were so few of them now. Entire species had been reduced to handfuls of survivors. Great civilizations that had spanned star systems were now represented by single individuals. 300 years ago, we offered you partnership, Fleet. Admiral Kim began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. You chose division. We offered you protection. You chose independence. We offered you peace. You chose war. His eyes swept across the assembled aliens, many of whom couldn't meet his gaze. The result speaks for itself. Billions dead, worlds destroyed, entire species extinct. It's all because you could not accept that sometimes freedom requires wisdom, and wisdom sometimes requires guidance. Captain Hei-Won Shin, now promoted to admiral, stepped forward. Her uniform bore the insignia of the newly established Terran Empire, a golden star surrounded by protective orbits. The Terran Empire is established. All species will be protected. All conflicts will be prevented. All worlds will know peace. Fleet. Admiral Kim nodded grimly. Whether they want it or not. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The galaxy had realized its doom the moment humanity turned away. But they had learned too late that humanity's greatest gift hadn't been their protection. It had been their choice to protect rather than conquer. Now that choice was gone. The galaxy would have peace, prosperity, and protection. But it would never again have the freedom to choose its own path. The age of human benevolence was over. The age of human dominion had begun. The end.